The question of is addiction a disease is one I hope to answer with this video. There's a lot of misconception when it comes to addiction because what we see in the addict is a lot of really bad choices made over and over again, even despite having some pretty serious consequences. It looks like they have bad morals, bad value, bad upbringing, low self-esteem, no willpower, etc. Also, I hope to explain why we are all at some risk for developing addiction, no matter who we are. So to begin, I am going to look at the very basics of addiction to not overcomplicate things. So for the longest time, doctors and clinicians were looking at the prefrontal cortex. The reason why is because that's where our ability to make choices occur, as well as our personality, our values, our morals, etc. And when we see someone that is addicted to a substance or a behavior, we see them making a lot of bad choices over and over again, despite the serious negative consequences, whether it's legal troubles, relationship problems with friends or loved ones, financial difficulty, and emotional problems as well due to their drug use and or the problem behavior. But with the advancement on our ability to look at the brain, we see that it actually stems here in the part of the brain that was first developed to help us to survive. Basically, it's a survival machine, and just like a machine, it has no thoughts, no morals, no choice. It just operates automatically. It has programmed into it things we need in order to survive, like food, sex to perpetuate the species, and the ability to react suddenly, the kill or defend, or the fight or flight function, as well as many others. The way that this machine learns what is important for us in our survival is the release of chemical messenger dopamine. We have a natural craving for food, we get hungry, we satisfy that craving, dopamine gets released from the midbrain to the prefrontal cortex, and we feel good. In order to remember this, the prefrontal cortex sends down a messenger known as glutamate, just think of it as memory, to the midbrain. This forms the memory to remember to do it again next time we feel this way. This is how a healthy brain is supposed to function. But when you add drugs into the mix, they also release dopamine. And no matter who you are, how much money you have, how much money you don't have, the education level, your ethnic background, age, or gender, it doesn't matter as long as you have a brain and start using drugs. The midbrain, which again is just like a machine, it automatically puts it on the survival list because it releases dopamine. Now, for most people, it stays toward the bottom of the list, and the prefrontal cortex has the top-down control over the midbrain. But the more a person uses and the more frequently they use, the midbrain just starts to retain a pattern that this drug, no matter what the drug is important for survival. And when they start to use more and more often, the connection gets stronger and the drug starts to work its way towards the top of the list. How fast it travels up is different for each individual based on genetics and tolerance levels, but once a drug is used often enough, the midbrain gets switched to believe that the drug is now needed for survival. Typically, a person will use more to deal with emotional pain, and the brain forms the memory of how to cope with stress by using the drug. And stress can manifest itself in a number of different ways, such as boredom, loneliness, anger, or frustration, depression or sadness, anxiety, fear, or worry. The brain will start to have cravings, and when they have these cravings, the midbrain sends out messengers to go and get the drug. And the addict at this point has tunnel vision. Except this is where the vicious cycle of addiction occurs, is because the one thing that's actually killing them is the one thing that the midbrain's telling them they need to get in order to survive. So this is addiction. Understanding that addiction is a disease is important. However, I don't want you to think that because it's a disease that people aren't responsible for their actions while being addicted. They are. It's not a cop-out or an excuse to continue using, just like the diabetic is responsible for taking their medication. So too is the addict responsible for getting help. In my blog, I will talk about my own addiction to alcohol and discuss the ways that it helped me get sober, as well as some personal reflections as an addictions counselor in Montana. If you feel like you may have a problem with drugs or alcohol, the first step to solving any kind of problem is first acknowledging it. And I would encourage anyone that feels that way to seek help. This disease progresses. It gets worse. And the reason there's no cure is because the memory of the drug use is always there, carved deeply into the brain. And so people who return to use often find themselves exactly where they left off.